Ellie and I have had the pleasure of working together to work on this Hallmark program that Ellie's led at Walmart. And so we'll speak a little bit about that and then dive right into the nitty gritty. So Ellie, maybe it'd be best if you'd start with what is your job? What is this program you oversee at Walmart? And where did this come from? How did Walmart get in the business of helping solve this student debt crisis?
Sure. So I've been at Walmart about 6 years now, about the last 5 on our U.S. business people team. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, my leadership came to me and said, we want to reevaluate our educational benefits program. We know this is really important to our associates, but we don't feel like we're getting great outcomes right now. Tell us how we might do it more, do it differently. And so we spent quite a bit of time looking at our current program and understanding sort of what are the innovations out in this space. And as part of that, we started looking at organizations we might partner with. And what we discovered is, similar to many companies, Walmart had taken what I would call a very traditional approach to education benefits, which is really thinking about it in terms of reputation, eager to get people enrolled, but really not paying much attention after that point to what happened to the students. And as we began to reevaluate the strategic implications of a program like this, we realized that due to the changing nature of the workforce, this could really become a value add to Walmart as a business, as well as to our associates, if we really paid attention to getting people not just into programs, but through the programs. So we really turned our program on its head and started thinking about completion as the key indicator of success. Because completion, actually getting that diploma or degree in hand, is really where the value is for the student, right, for our associates, and for the business. Because it indicates that they've gotten the full skill set. And of course, in the marketplace, there's no value if you get halfway through a degree and then never complete. And so as we started looking at people who cared about completion rates, we found this great partner in Guild Education. And we made a number of different strategic design choices with our program. Because when you start thinking about completion as the outcome, everything changes. You start thinking much more strategically about the universities that you want to partner with. You start thinking about how you encourage people to persist over time and how you can support them to make sure they complete. And you start thinking about things like the economics of it and what will nudge people along and make sure that they get through the degree. And so we can talk about that in more detail as we get through it, but a lot of things change when you take this different view of the value to the associate and to the business.
That's a great overview. And as we think about it from Guild's perspective, we think about how do you help companies avoid this false choice for their employees between higher ed and workforce development. And we talk about that all the time because employees often feel like, okay, I can either use the tuition reimbursement program, I can front all this money and go get an unrelated degree in psychology, or I can do this workforce training, which feels like it's mandated by my boss and it's not about me, it's about compliance or maybe career growth, but I'm not even sure I want that thing. And we talk about eliminating that choice. We often work with HR or L&D, and you're in a really unique position in that you oversee and sit on a team that thinks about the HR and talent strategy at Walmart as well as learning. Can you talk a little bit about your program? Because I think the fact that you sit at that intersection has led Walmart to thinking about internal L&D strategy and workforce and pathways while still designing this as truly a benefit for your employees.
Absolutely. So really part of what we wanted to do, knowing we wanted to drive towards completion, was think about how do we accelerate people through the program. So a big component of what Walmart has been working on over the past couple of years has been what's known as our Academies program. We have built this really strong internal training program for our store associates that I think many people have heard about, where we have 200 locations across the US where people actually go for physical training on their jobs. And this ranges from 2 full weeks of training to 6 full weeks. Really sophisticated training, I think, that people would be surprised about if they knew. Things like how do you interpret a P&L? How do you run a business? Because remember, even a department manager at Walmart is running a $5 million plus business. A store manager is running a $100 million business. I think people often don't think of Walmart employees in that way. And so they need really sophisticated training to do their jobs well. And so what we've tried to do is fold together how we think about our benefits program and how we think about our internal training. One of the things we did was ask all of the universities we partner with to take a look at our internal training programs and see if we could get college credit for them. And actually, they were a little bit, I think, skeptical about that on the front side. And what was really validating, I think, to us was when they took a look at the curriculum, our students get between 2 and 21 college credits for their internal training at Walmart. That's up to a full semester's worth of college credit, which means that our associates then who take advantage of the benefit can move forward through the program even more quickly. They have a semester worth of college credit behind them already. And so that's one of the ways, because we know, right, through behavioral economics, if you feel like you're starting partway through a program, you're more likely to persist and complete. That's one of the factors we built in. And as we think about how work is changing for Walmart associates, we've really focused on degrees that will benefit the business over time and areas where we know the workforce in general will be increasing. So basic business degrees, supply chain degrees, IT degrees and certificates, which we just announced this year, and we'll be looking further at healthcare degrees and other degrees over time, because we really want to put our associates in a great position should they choose to stay at Walmart or should they choose to leave us and go elsewhere, which we know is reality for many people, right?
That is a great segue into talking about the business case. So as you were starting down this path, you had championship from your HR leadership, which is also blended to think about L&D at Walmart. But as for folks in the audience who are thinking about a business case for their own company and thinking about reforming tuition reimbursement or enhancing a education program or a learning program, will you talk a little bit about how you built the business case and maybe how you also engaged people outside of HR and L&D to become champions of this program?
Yeah, so I think the business case, we were lucky, first of all. We had leaders at this moment in time who were really focused again on future of work and how we need to change as a company to support our associates. And so we had the benefit of that on the front side. But there are several elements to the business case. The easiest one to explain, and the one that is most backed up by research today, is around retention. Right, so there have been great studies done by organizations like the Lumina Foundation, which is one of the premier foundations in the US focused on economic mobility for workers, that show that programs like these really do significantly impact employee retention and drive a serious ROI for the company. So we utilize that research to help build the case for Walmart, which says, we know the cost of turnover for our frontline associates as well for managerial associates. There's a significant cost. And if we can bring down those costs through a relatively affordable benefit for Walmart, then this plays out in terms of employee performance and retention over time. Even more important to our executives in our case was this idea of skill development and performance, right? The only reason you have learning programs as a company is to drive skill and performance. That is the foundation of it. And this idea that we're building those competencies for the future is really critical. Walmart has this history, and we take enormous pride in the fact that 75% of our store managers, as an example, come from the front line and are promoted from within. Similarly, we have a lot of people in the corporate office that have come from the field, and we know that our history shows that a blend of people who have that experience growing up through the company, as well as people who come in from the outside, like myself, really make the strongest teams. You need both perspectives to do well as a company. And so this idea of performance and focusing, right? It's not a winner take all, any program you want, but we have focused on degrees that are important to our business, really help build the business case as well for where we're going in the future as a company and driving that employee advancement and skill set.
I think you hit on two of the really important pieces there, because as we look with companies, and Walmart's actually a great example of a company that didn't have extra money to spend for this. It had to have a real business case. But as we talk to all types of companies about the equation, we found time and time again, and the research has now shown that the turnover cost, just recruitment and retention, actually makes sure that this program pays for itself. So we like to call it a self-funding program, and that always shocks people who think college is $50,000 a year. But in these cases, we're talking about schools that are $6,000 a year, and that exists, right? Price and quality are not correlated in higher ed, unfortunately.
Yep.
But then for the companies that think about the additional skills development and the things that build on top of it, that's where the ROI goes from being a neutral ROI to substantially positive.
Yep.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how you thought about what schools you chose
absolutely.
and the programs?
Yeah. So again, completion being the metric we care about, we were really focused, and where Guild has been an enormously valuable partner to us, is really understanding which schools perform the best for adult working learners, right? So all of us typically when we think about college, we think about 18 to 22-year-olds in this very Ivy League, beautiful campus experience. Adult working learners need something significantly different. They're trying to balance work, often families, and an education. And schools that serve that population look different than your traditional school set. And so where Guild has really been enormously helpful to us is combing through the data to look at outcomes that we can feel confident of putting our associates through and putting our brand against. So we look at things like graduation rates, right? Best in class tends to be in the 65 to 70% graduation rate for adult working learners, which is substantially higher than the average. We look at average time to graduate. Do people get through typically in 4 to 6 years? Because that's really important. You can't have someone lingering too long. They're not going to finish. We look at things like post-graduation income and what's that level of increase that people typically see, because we want to give people valuable degrees. We look at student debt loan ratios afterwards. Even though obviously Walmart is funding this, it's still an important metric to show that the schools are paying attention and caring about the financial outcomes that they're imposing on students afterwards. And so we have been very careful in selecting out of Guild's already curated network 5 universities that range from sort of relatively unknown but excellent outcomes for adult working learners, like Bellevue University, Brandman University, universities you probably haven't heard about, and then bigger names like University of Florida, Southern New Hampshire University, Purdue Global, that really also serve well and are a bit more marquee names for our students. They have choice. They're not overwhelmed by choice, but they can feel confident that we're giving them great options.
One thing that we found is that the companies that are running these programs most successfully, like yours, are where it's really tied to the corporate strategy. And I think that's probably true of all initiatives that happen in any shared service in a Fortune 500, let alone Fortune 1. But can you share a little bit about how the digital transformation and the shift for Walmart today from being strictly a retail company to also an e-commerce company connected back to the expansion that you all just initiated around technology degrees and programs?
Absolutely. So this year at our shareholders meeting just 2 weeks ago, we announced an expansion of the program, both adding universities and adding degree options. We introduced 14 new IT degrees and certificates. I think some interesting things that we built into the program here. We know that a lot of students don't necessarily want to pursue a 4-year degree. Particularly in the IT space, a credential, a 6-month credential or 1-year credential can really give you a leg up and significantly increase your skill set and your incomes. And so we added several certificate programs, not just 2 or 4-year degrees. And as you mentioned, as we grow as an e-commerce company, this is a huge focus, right, for us and for many other companies. And so we looked at things like general IT degrees and computer science degrees, but also things like cybersecurity or programming degrees, which is a significant need for Walmart and will continue to be an even more important part of the company as we go forward.
Part of what we're finding is that companies need to have nimble benefits. One of the challenges, and a lot of our work emanated out of Starbucks' early initiatives around offering college to their employees, was they did an agreement with a single university, which is great if enough of your employees want to go to that university or can get accepted. And so what we've strived to do with Guild is build a network of partners so that Walmart can pick and choose and change their mind or adapt the strategy. As you think about what you would advise to someone in a position similar to yours in the audience who's thinking about how to do this, what are some of the early steps you took? What do you wish you had done differently? What would you advise to them?
I think start with understanding the future of your company, right? Where are they going? And what is the leadership point of view in terms of the return on investment that you're seeking? A lot of it is about coalition building within your company and making sure that you're driving toward the executives or what they're really looking for. Again, in our case, the performance piece and the retention piece were key. For some companies, it'll be around attracting a new higher quality type of associate. For some, it'll be very much reputation-based, but still, I would argue, should be based around completion, because reputation will be benefited if you actually get people through the degrees. I would say do a landscape analysis of potential partners, right? All the typical due diligence you would do. Lean on the research that exists out there, as I mentioned. In terms of things we would have done differently, I think we decided to start small. We wanted to be sure in our first year in particular that we were really delivering a great associate value proposition. If we had been more ambitious, I think we would have started with more degrees. and potentially had a bigger program to start. But we need to prototype, we needed to build and test and make sure what we were delivering was great. And that involved quite a bit of work on the back end to make sure that things like book reimbursement was seamless, fast for associates because they're paying money up front and they need to be confident that within a week or two they're going to get that money refunded to them. So we had to do a lot of work on the back end to make sure that the experience for our associates was really smooth and seamless before we decided to broaden. But I think there are now several examples of companies like Walmart. We have the Disneys, we have the Discover Financials, we have others that are doing similar types of programs, that there is now sort of a path one can walk and you might be able to go a little faster.
You're hitting on something important, which is there hasn't really been a playbook here, and we often draw an analog because we think of ourselves as a little bit like the Kaiser for education benefits, but in the 60s, to be nerdy here for a second, when healthcare as a benefit came onto the scene, it was in reaction to the fact that the military offered healthcare to its members and the private sector couldn't compete, which now sort of feels foreign to the era we're in, to think of the government sector eating all of the great talent in the world and the private sector fighting hard to compete. But that was what spurred healthcare as a benefit, was the private sector suddenly had to react. And so suddenly all these leaders in private sector companies all over the US had to figure out how to put together a healthcare plan. We see a corollary that we're kind of at this early day, and I think there's lots of organizations here today who are building these new benefits classes for large and small companies alike. What is it meant for? You're kind of a prototype of that. You're building a career where you're building these new playbooks, but in a very large context with lots of impact. How is it impacting your career that you're sort of building this new playbook, building a new team, innovating within a very large company?
I think the lens we like to apply, but is relatively new to Walmart, is this idea of shared value, right? Which nobody here would be surprised to hear about. But this idea that we can benefit the company, but also benefit our associates in society in a really meaningful way. And I think that idea will only become more influential and important to the private sector over time, because it's what customers want companies to be doing. It's what our employees want us to be doing, is really being thoughtful and thinking differently and not appearing, selfish or self-centered as an organization. And there are lots of examples. It's not a zero-sum game, right? There are lots of examples of where you can build value for the whole. But it takes a lot of really thoughtful planning. And we're starting to think as a company about that in the healthcare sector a little bit differently, and in other areas a little bit differently. And so I would just, encourage people to take that broader mindset. It does pose new challenges, but I think it's the future of where the private sector is going.
Where are you getting your inspiration? How are you charting your own career when you're doing this sort of work? And for people who are aspiring to follow in the path that you're in, how are you navigating that in a big company?
Well, I've had the benefit, most of my career was actually in the public and the nonprofit sector before I came to Walmart. I spent a lot of time in the foundation world in particular, and I learned a lot from sort of that way of thinking about shared value. I would encourage people who are interested in this area to look at sort of some of the innovative things that foundations are doing, how government, public-private partnerships are something I'd explore and understand how the private sector to public and nonprofit sector can really work together in unusual and different ways. Those are sort of ideas from that field, and doing research and looking at what other companies are doing is what have inspired me and really led me down this path. And I would encourage people to look there.
Okay. Last question is, since we're talking about something that's really nascent right now, as we think about it, we think this education as a benefit category is very new. We think even approaching L&D or workforce development from an employees first perspective is rather new and novel. We're not seeing a lot of that. Where do you hope this industry, and where do you hope people who follow in your shoes take this in the next 5-10 years? And what do you hope to see corporate America do with this opportunity?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of reacting to the fact that the public sector isn't doing the full job that I think we all think it should be doing.
Yeah, we should talk about that a little bit.
Right, which is a little unfortunate.
You have a public policy background. Maybe share why that's happening.
It's a bit of a market failure that we're trying to rectify, right? So people are saddled with $4 trillion of educational debt in this country. It need not be so. It's through a whole set of structural choices that have been made over time that have influenced both how education is perceived and how education is priced. And large and small companies have the ability to really make an impact here and disrupt because we have negotiating power that an individual doesn't. And so there's, I think, a lot of good that can be done in this space. but it's, things like this probably should be the basis of government action, but we're not in a time and place where a lot of that is happening. So what's great about educational benefits, if you think about the suite of benefits that a company could potentially offer, education is probably one of the ones that makes the most sense. In a sense, even more than healthcare. In a sense, right, a lot of the other benefits, it's really tied to the work. It's really tied to the investment you're trying to make in performance of your company. And so if anything, I would argue this is one of the best things the company should invest in because it drives, right, everything you're trying to do as a company. So anyways, that's how I think about it.
And what do you hope, thinking about how other companies think about this problem and things that maybe aren't germane to Walmart, where are some of the other areas where you think companies can push this topic further along? Or what are some of the, sky high ideas that your team has had or things that you hope to see others take to fruition?
Well, some of the things that we're planning I can't really talk about, unfortunately. But I would say, think about future of work. Think about where the economy is going. And are companies investing in the jobs of the future? Are they preparing their workers for the inevitable transitions that will come? Are they protecting them and thinking about the impact? Are they paving the way in a responsible way and in a business additive way for their employees to have a strong future? Not every company thinks about it that way, but it's clear the economy is changing. It's clear jobs are changing, and companies that aren't thinking about that are going to be left in the lurch because they're not going to have the talent they need at the time they need it. Start preparing now, is what I would say.
I think you hit on something so important too, which is you look at the labor market today, you look at all the reports coming out, we're seeing this wild competitive economy right now with record low unemployment for a variety of jobs that are being hired for now, but unfortunately the data tells us those won't be the jobs 10 years from now. So we're in a weird spot where we being like global economy, the magic hand of Adam Smith is encouraging these folks to enter into these trades and into these jobs that we need today, but we might not need tomorrow. And so it's very cool, at least from our vantage point, to see corporate America actually finding a way to have a business case to step in so that if somebody's doing this job today, they actually have a path to a job for tomorrow. Because otherwise what's gonna happen is we're gonna have a bunch of folks in retail, hospitality, food service, et cetera, who've been trained in one type of job and simply aren't prepared for the job that company needs 10 years from now.
And we know that the performance of our company, again, just to go back, is driven by associates that have grown up with us. So we don't want to lose them, regardless of what level they're at. They have really important institutional knowledge of their community, of their customers, right? We want to build on that. We don't want to let that go. So how do we build their capabilities so they're ready for the jobs of tomorrow for us?
Great. Well, thank you all for listening. Thanks, Ellie, for coming and visiting us in New York today. She's here with her dad, who is they're on their vacation, willing to pop in and hang out with us today. So thank you for doing it. Pleasure. And we'll be around later and would love to talk to people thinking about this.